In the coming month, February 2025, a storm is coming. Neptune is meeting the north node of the moon. Expect a powerful surge of Neptunian influence, illusion, idealism, and all things oceanic. When this has happened before, this is manifested in very physical fashion, in the form of powerful cyclones and storms that have been written into the history books. This month, with a lot of planetary energy in mystical Pisces, will be time to contemplate the idea of rebirth. Whether literally or not, from here on out, what was will be washed away to make way for the new. And there's something else happening in February that you're going to want to pay attention to. Towards the end of the month, the war planet Mars will reach the end of its retrograde, which began in early December. A lot of processes that have been stalled during the retrograde period will start to move forward again. We can expect to see reactions to some of the events of the past few months, including the fall of the Assad regime in Syria, the LA fires, and the wave of quote-unquote mystery drone sightings that plagued the US in recent weeks. We're at the top of the roller coaster of 2025 now, and it's about to start rolling down. So please join me, your host Dan Waits, for a concise lowdown on the astrology of February 2025 and its implications both for you and for the wider world. But before we get into the forecast, let's take a look at recent events and the astrology that signified them. There's no avoiding the main event of January, the inauguration of Donald Trump as the 47th President of the United States. Last month, I noted that Mars in Cancer was very strong in his inauguration chart, and it was tightly conjunct the IC, which is the base of the chart, the part speaking to home and family, property and homeland. To be sure, we saw anti-Trump protests across America, but what caught my eye was that the inauguration was moved indoors at the last minute. This was put down officially to the cold weather, but they'd always known that the weather in DC in January is cold. Many people reasonably suspect that the real reason was to mitigate security threats, perhaps involving foreign-controlled or mysterious drones. But the most significant thing about the inauguration chart was that it came during a tight conjunction between the Sun and Pluto, the planet of power, in the very earliest degrees of Aquarius. Among the most prominent people at the ceremony were America's richest and best-known tech billionaires, Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, and Jeff Bezos. These three men have a combined net worth of almost $1 trillion, and they were even seated in front of Trump's cabinet picks. As the source of light, the sun's function is to illuminate. And what I think we got at the inauguration, among other things, was a very stark indicator of where power now lies in the United States in this Pluto in Aquarius era. As soon as Trump entered the White House, he issued a flurry of executive orders on all sorts of matters, including withdrawing the US from the World Health Organization. America seems to have chosen plutocracy over bureaucracy, at least for now. But the most Aquarian moment of all came on January the 21st, as Trump joined with billionaires Larry Ellison and Sam Altman of OpenAI to announce the launch of the Stargate project, a company that will invest $500 billion into building AI infrastructure in the US over the next 4 years. In other words, the plan is to build Skynet. Clearly, the election of Trump hasn't stopped our march towards the Ahrimanic AI singularity. Far from it. It's now proceeding full steam ahead. We'll cover this in much more depth in a video on this channel very soon. And a Pluto-Aquarian World Astrology Report video wouldn't be complete without a mention of the UFO phenomenon. Again, as the Sun conjoined Pluto, we saw more moves towards supposed disclosure of the reality of UFOs and the US government's interaction with the phenomenon. A new whistleblower emerged with a story about the psychic summoning of UFOs and crash retrievals. Another emerged on 4chan with a crazy story about a 700-year-old, 8 feet tall, Nordic-looking being discovered in a cave in Antarctica. Are these particular stories true or just more manipulations? It's hard to tell and easy to be skeptical, but there is a core of truth to this issue. And what's clear is it isn't going away. January also saw the return to the public eye of the horrendous grooming gang scandal in Britain, which saw the sexual abuse of thousands of young girls in the UK. This scandal was disgracefully hushed up by the UK government. Retrogrades tend to look to the past, and this is an older story which many people understandably feel hasn't been properly reckoned with by the British state. I think we see the signature of Mars as retrograde in the signs of Leo and Cancer in its re-emergence. It was Elon Musk, as the richest man in the world, an extremely visible and central and leonine figure, who brought it back into the public eye. But it's a Mars in Cancer story too. It's about failures of care and horrific sexual violence committed against vulnerable children. But there was some good news in January. On January the 15th, Israel and Hamas finally agreed to a ceasefire and prisoner exchange after more than a year of sickening destruction, killing, and ethnic cleansing. The war broke out after the Hamas attack on October the 7th of 2023. And if you look at the positions of Mars and the Sun at that time, you'll see that Mars was just emerging from the beams of the Sun following its cazimi. The ceasefire agreement came with Mars almost exactly opposing the Sun. This marks the equivalent of the full moon in Mars's cycle with the Sun. Let's hope that this marks the end of the war. And finally, we had the LA fires, which began on January the 7th. In the exclusive bonus section of this video, available for World Astrology Report members, we look at the fires from an astrological lens. There were some big signals that something like this was on the way. And in the extended video, we look at what they were. But now, let's get into the astrology of February. The month starts with a loss of strength for Venus, planet of union. If you're enjoying this video so far, please do me a favor and click like to let YouTube know that you like this. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and enable notifications, and make sure not to miss more of these updates. Thanks. On February the 4th, Venus will enter the sign of Aries. Venus is the planet of union, beauty, love, and attraction, and as it moves around the zodiac, its expression changes according to the natures of the 12 signs. Aries is Mars's sign, a sign signifying the unmediated experience and expression of the self. Aries is about doing new things, being brave, being first. Aries likes to pioneer and get there before anyone else. To understand Venus in Aries, we apply these themes to the agenda of Venus, which is the unification of disparate elements through forces of attraction. All things being equal, Venus in Aries natives will tend to make the first move, look for passion, action, and adventure in their love life, and find things like bravery, originality, and individualism attractive. Venus in Aries artists are often ahead of the curve, like Johnny Cash, Enya, and Bob Marley. According to traditional astrological principles, Venus is seen as debilitated in Aries because it's one of the signs that opposes one of her home signs of Libra. Venus in Aries might have trouble sustaining relationships because there's more interest in starting them and the excitement of new partnerships. She may just go for the wrong kind of person, martial figures who aren't always ideal as long-term partners. As with all placements, though, there are ways to figure out and work successfully with these energies over time. With Venus in Aries, we'll all partake a little more in that energy. You might start to notice a bit more selfishness or impulsiveness in your close relationships. At the same time, it's a great time to do new, exciting things with partners and inject new energy into a relationship if it's become stale. Try to work with the energy and it will go more smoothly. On the world stage, Venus signifies diplomatic relations between countries. They may come under more strain with Venus in Aries. The usual diplomatic niceties might be lacking. I can think of a certain president who might push the boundaries during this period. The important thing to bear in mind is that Venus is preparing to station retrograde on March the 2nd. Venus retrograde can be a more challenging time for relationships, when we start to look a little more critically at those we have, or look back at those we had in the past. Venus in Aries will be setting up that retrograde, so look out for the themes that start to emerge in February in your romantic life, or things that have to do with pleasure, beauty, and things of value. If you jump into something with Venus in early Aries, you might come to regret that decision when Venus reverses course. But just as Venus takes a dive, the condition of Jupiter, the greater benefic, will improve. On February the 4th, Jupiter will station direct in the 12th degree of Gemini. This means that in early February, Jupiter's warm, expansive, hopeful energy will get a boost. If you have important chart placements from 10 to 15 degrees of the mutable signs, that's Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces, you'll likely feel this energy and experience an expanding sense of faith and possibility. Enjoy. On the world stage, Jupiter's transit through Gemini has signified a difficult time for our relationship with the truth. Social networks have been flooded with information of dubious provenance. Some of it, to be sure, is useful, revelatory, but finding it is a little like pearl diving in a sewage outlet. With Jupiter stationing direct, it will now be making its final run out of Gemini. So enjoy this manic information junkie energy while it lasts. In June, Jupiter enters Cancer. But let's change tack a little. We're also going to see something in February that hasn't happened since 2008, something that hasn't historically been easy. I just want to give you a quick reminder that if you enjoy this content, then please do consider supporting the channel by signing up as a member of World Astrology Report at worldastrologyreport.com. You'll get access to ad-free extended versions of my videos, including this one. And you'll get access to monthly long-form live streams, including my recent talks on the Kali Yuga, the extended forecast for 2025, and a deep dive into the astrological connections between UFOs and fallen angels. And you'll be able to join the next stream taking place on February the 23rd on the Age of Aquarius, in which we'll be unpacking what the Age of Aquarius is, what it promises for the world, and whether or not it's here yet. Anyone can purchase entry to the stream on the live streams page of worldastrologyreport.com, but members get into every stream for free. You also get 20% off consultations with me, and you can cancel at any time. Now, on with the video. On February the 7th, we'll see a conjunction between Neptune, planet of ideals, illusions, and all things oceanic, and the north node of the moon. The nodes are points where the orbit of the moon meets the ecliptic, which is the path of the sun, and so they indicate the eclipsing points. The sun needs to be close to one of the nodes for eclipses to happen. So the nodes carry some of that fated, revelatory eclipse energy. But there's disagreement in astrology about how to interpret the nodes. In Indian astrology, the North Node is known as Rahu and represents a force of hunger for the gains to be had in the material world. Others say the nodes relate particularly to karma and destiny, the North Node being where we'll go in life, the South Node where we've been. Regardless, they're certainly sensitive points, there's no question. A planet conjunct or square the nodes is jacked up and much more active than usual. So Neptune conjunct the North Node will bring the world a heavier dose of Neptunian energy. Neptune is the planet of the imaginal, illusory, and archetypal. Whenever Neptune is activated, it's a time to be extra careful that we're not slipping into delusion or being deceived, and that we're seeing things clearly. But Neptune is also the planet of all things related to water and the oceans. I've looked at the history of conjunctions between Neptune and the North Node, and I've seen a pattern, and it's this. These conjunctions seem to coincide regularly with huge storms and cyclones. The last time Neptune conjoined the North Node was the 28th of April, 2008. This was very close to the time that Cyclone Nargis hit the country of Myanmar in Southeast Asia. The cyclone caused a storm surge almost 6 meters high and floods up to 50 kilometers inland, and it killed an estimated 140,000 people. We go back another nodal cycle. Neptune met the North Node on the 9th of October, 91, when what has gone down in history as the, quote, perfect storm, a powerful cyclone, hit parts of Canada and the northeastern United States. It did $200 million worth of damage. And if we go back yet another nodal cycle, we had a Neptune North Node conjunction in December 1974, at the time that Cyclone Tracy destroyed the Australian city of Darwin. So there does seem to be a pattern here, and it's that Neptune conjunct the North Node brings angry concentrations of Neptunian energy which tend to manifest as storms. But if something like this were to happen again, where might it strike? Well, let's turn to our astro maps. The planetary lines on these reflect places that are more likely to experience concentrations of this energy. And if we look back, these lines do seem to work. Here are the planetary lines for Cyclone Nargis in 2008, the perfect storm in 91, and Cyclone Tracy in 74. As you can see, they're all very close to the places affected. This time, astromapping is highlighting far western Canada and Brazil, as well as Eastern Africa, the Middle East and the Black Sea, as well as parts of East Asia, including the Korean Peninsula. let's hope for the best. And one more thing, it occurs to me that we may already have seen the manifestation of this Neptune North Node conjunction. On January the 7th, when the LA fires broke out, Neptune and Rahu were already pretty close, around 4 degrees away from each other. But this, of course, was a firestorm, not a watery one. And at the time, the North Node was still in the fire sign of Aries. So who knows? Perhaps we already saw this transit play out? Let's hope so. Now, soon after the exact conjunction of Neptune and the North Node comes February's full moon in Leo, which is going to put the spotlight on another one of the outer planets, Uranus. On February the 12th comes a full moon in the sign of Leo. Full moons mark moments of culmination and revelation. When they take place in Leo, they'll highlight the themes of centrality, authenticity, singularness, and visibility. These themes will express themselves in different parts of your life depending on where in your own natal chart you find the sign of Leo. For example, perhaps Leo is your 10th house, and this moon might mark an important moment of recognition in your career. Or Leo could be your 2nd house, and the moon might reveal a financial situation that needs your attention. Any full moon in Leo implies that the sun will be in Aquarius. So this full moon marks a culmination that will highlight the polarity between the self and the collective, or between the center and the periphery. On the world stage, a full moon in Leo will highlight people and places that resonate to that sign, and more generally to the themes of centrality, visibility, and singularness that we already saw. Last year's Leo full moon came on January the 25th, 2024. The next day, the UN's International Court of Justice, which is a unique court with a global mandate, and so it carries that solar quality, made a ruling that Israel had to take all measures to prevent genocide in Gaza. One country that resonates to the sign of Leo is Japan, the land of the rising sun. Again, think of the sun as ruler of Leo. Just before that full moon, Japan became the 5th country to land a spacecraft on the moon. We can see here the themes of Leo in the country of Japan, and Aquarius, which is a sign we generally connect to technology and space travel, among other things. So back to the Leo full moon coming in February 2025. This particular full moon has a twist. It's tightly square to Uranus, so it'll have a disruptive, surprising, shocking, or fast-acting energy. Be prepared for things you weren't expecting coming to light. And expect surprising or shocking developments related to Leo places and institutions. Think leaders, celebrities, and institutions with singular and highly visible roles. The geodetic map highlights 2 particular regions as most likely to be implicated by this moon. This section of Asia Pacific, which includes Japan, Korea, and the Philippines, and this key swathe of Central and Eastern Europe, running through the Middle East, the Arabian Peninsula, and North and Eastern Africa. If we look at where in the world this moon will be rising and culminating when it goes exact, the map is highlighting Russia and Iran, among other places. Look out for shocks and surprises implicating those countries. And now, let's change tack again, because February marks the beginning of Pisces season. There will be a lot of Piscean energy in the latter half of February. The month kicks off with a conjunction of Venus and Neptune in Pisces on February the 1st, with the moon also in Pisces, and that will really emphasize the union of Venus and Neptune. And I like this astrology. When Venus meets Neptune, it's a great time to allow yourself to luxuriate in the dream of love. It's excellent for artistic inspiration and for pleasurable activities in general. Venus is in her sign of exaltation here, so she's very strong. Put this day in your diary as one to have a good time with a loved one or friends, or to get creative. Romance may be afoot. The only thing to bear in mind is that what comes here could be fleeting and even potentially illusory. A new connection made here may not be all it promises. As long as you're aware of that, it's a moment to enjoy. Now, as we've seen, Venus leaves Pisces for Aries early in the month, but there's more Pisces on the way. A lot more. On February the 14th, Valentine's Day, Mercury enters Pisces, where it will remain until March the 3rd. Mercury is the messenger, the interpreter, the magician, and the trader. So Mercury in Pisces is a poetic Mercury that strives to express truths that language isn't designed for, the deeper undercurrents of reality. Mercury in Pisces is seen as debilitated. It's in its fall and detriment in this sign. So it's not so good at precision and getting the details right. If you have to do your accounts in this period, make sure to check your work and then check it again. But the transit begins on Valentine's Day, which is the kind of occasion this Piscean Mercury can easily rise to. So it'll be a great time to try to express how you really feel about someone, and if you're normally afraid of writing poetry, this is the day to try. And then, on February the 18th, Pisces season truly begins. Pisces is the watery, immutable domicile of Jupiter and the exaltation of Venus. This is the last sign of the zodiac, signifying spirit's preparations to return to the ocean of consciousness from which it sprang, ready to be born anew. In terms of the sun's annual journey, in Pisces, we reach the last sign of the zodiac in the half of the year in which darkness dominates light. But light is gaining by the day, and at the spring equinox, when the sun enters Aries, light will finally have the upper hand. And so Pisces carries a sense of hope and optimism for a better future and a better life, but it's still partly anchored in darkness, in the realities of materiality. And so Pisces is associated with a kind of divine discontent. The Piscean archetypes are the poet, the martyr, and the mystic. There's a yearning to connect with Source, which can express itself healthily in the case of the saintly mystic, or unhealthily, as with the drunk. One of the most famous scholars of religion, Romania's Mircea Eliade, had his sun and moon in Pisces. Read a list of quotes from him if you want deep insight into the Piscean vision. My favorite might be this one. As long as you have not grasped that you have to die to grow, you are a troubled guest on this dark earth. And so the Piscean month, when winter is thawing but spring is yet to have sprung, is the time of year to contemplate rebirth and the return of the light. And this will be the last Pisces season with Neptune in Pisces. Very soon it will enter Aries, so this will be a good time to direct your attention to the Piscean part of your chart and life, and consider how it's changed over the past 13 years. The Piscean energy will peak at the end of the month on February the 28th, when we see a new moon in Pisces, and when there'll be 5 planets in the sign, 6 if you include the North Node: Sun, Moon, Mercury, Saturn, Neptune, and Rahu. This is a gathering of planets at the end of the old world. In general, new moons in Pisces bring the initiation of new stories and impulses around Piscean themes, the oceans, spirituality, intoxication, diversity, sex, and the arts. As we've been tracking on this channel, one of the major themes that Saturn and Neptune in Pisces have been bringing up is migration. I think this new moon could highlight that theme once again. We could also expect new developments in generative AI and technology that manipulates our view of reality and augments or substitutes for the imagination. In general, new moons in Pisces seem to highlight island nations in particular, those for which the ocean is very present in the consciousness. We can expect something similar around the time of this year's Pisces new moon on February the 28th. Finally, there's one more thing we have to talk about, and that's the end of Mars retrograde. On February the 24th, Mars will station direct, marking the end of this Mars retrograde period, which began on December the 6th. You may have noticed it was harder than normal to get things done during this time. You may have come up against unforeseen obstacles, or felt like you were working harder than ever, but not getting anywhere. That's Mars retrograde for you. But towards the end of February, we reach the end of the tunnel, so to speak. If you have chart placements that are closely aspected by Mars's direct station, which will come in the 18th degree of Cancer, then you'll likely feel an influx of hot martial energy. Things that were stuck may start to move forward. But bear in mind that it will take Mars a couple of weeks to really get moving once again. So expect a slow start to whatever does get moving. By the middle of March, all other things being equal, productivity should have returned. Now, at a mundane level, what can we expect from Mars stationing direct? Well, to answer that, we have to consider the events that we saw when Mars stationed retrograde and during its retrograde transit. These are the events that are going to inform what happens once Mars stations direct again. We saw several governments falling around the time of the retrograde. For example, the French government collapsed, as did the regime of Bashar al-Assad in Syria, ending the war there after 13 years. And here's a striking example of astrological timing. The German government of Olaf Scholz also fell shortly before Mars's retrograde station. Initially, there was some uncertainty about when new elections would be held, but eventually Germany settled on the date of February the 23rd, almost exactly when Mars stations direct. We also saw a huge wave of sightings of what have been called mystery drones or UFOs, depending on who you ask, over military sites in the UK and US, especially New Jersey, but also all over the world. I'm expecting that we'll see some action taken in response to that wave after Mars Stations Direct. This might come from the administration of Donald Trump, or perhaps we see even more significant actions from whoever was responsible for the drones, if it wasn't the US government itself. Maybe that was just a warning shot, and the real wave is yet to come. At the retrograde station, we also saw a lot more coming out related to the Diddy sexual assault and blackmail case implicating famous celebrities in Hollywood. I think we'll see more of this around the direct station, especially since there's a new sheriff in town who isn't exactly a friend of liberal Hollywood. Last month I said I thought that the events that came around the retrograde station seemed to constitute the US and its allies like Israel turning the tables on Russia and its allies in various parts of the world. At the direct station, I think we might see reversals and reactions on the part of Russia and its allies who may try to turn the tables once again on the West. And then there are the LA fires. I'm going to talk about those fires in the bonus section of this video, which is available for World Astrology Report members. If you'd like to watch that part of the video and enjoy extended versions of all my videos going back to May last year, and watch all my long-form live streams, then you know where to go. That's it for this month's forecast. Thanks for watching, and see you again very soon.